Hello everyone and welcome to the second episode of the Board Game Barrage podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Neelan, and with me is Mark.
Hello.
And Kellen.
Heyo.
If you visit our site at boardgamebarrage.com, content that's been posted by each of us will have different colored tank associated with it. If you see the orange tank, that's me. I'm your puzzly Eurogamer. The red tank, Kellen.
I'm all about social interactions and interactive fun games, unlike Neelan, who'd rather play puzzles by himself.
Solitaire games, that's my style. Mark, our green tank.
I'm the Goldilocks. I'm right there in the middle. I'm the Omni Gamer. I'll play a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
And yeah, together we're running the site. This episode, we're going to talk about the games we've been playing this week. We're then going to have a section talking about math trading. I feel like this is something we touched on briefly last week, and we had a lot of questions about what a math trade even is. And then we'll end off the show talking about stuff we're excited about and looking forward later in the year. So let's get right into it.
All right, well, I'll start us off. Last week I talked about the Bob Ross Art of Chill game. This week I played something a little bit different. I played 1830, which is one of the 18XX games. For those who don't know what 18XX games are, they are a series of games that are about the railroad era, so they're all sort of railroady type games. They generally have three main aspects to the game. There's a stock market aspect where you're buying and selling shares of the different railroad companies. There's a tile laying or railroad laying, in this case, aspect where there's like a actual map on the board where you're laying railroad tiles for your different companies that you're managing. And then there's a management section where you're actually managing these companies. So there's a stock market, there's a map where you're laying tiles out, and then there's actual company management where you're sort of buying and selling assets for the companies.
But there's like 100 of these games.
Yeah, right. So I played 1830, which is considered one of the more introductory level games, but there's like 1846, which is another one I've also played. There's 18, basically any number combination. There's also like 18AL, which is like railroads in Alabama, which is supposed to be a really good one. I'm not really sure, but so this is a whole subgenre of games. I was sort of, when I got into board gaming heavily, I sort of always thought of 18XX as this niche that was, you have to be like,
rabbit hole.
Right, or you have to be really into like railroads or like these type of games to get into them. So I was always hesitant to try them out. But then I tried out 1846 and I just absolutely loved it. But again, it's sort of as a contrast to the Bob Ross game, which is a game that is over 25 minutes. 1830, we started playing at 2 o'clock, which it wasn't so much playing as it was like learning the rules. So we went through like a rules introduction. None of us had actually played it before. That lasted about an hour, and then I had to run off to my soccer game about 3 o'clock, so an hour of that. Came back at 5:30, we were ready to start playing, and played until 12:30 in the morning. So
jeez.
Total of 8 hours, 7 hours actually playing the game, so
That is a long game.
Yeah.
So I haven't played one of these, but you're basically describing Ticket to Ride, right? That's kind of
basically Ticket to Ride with a little bit more
right.
to it. No, it's funny because they're all, I think, universally long games, but honestly the time I would never have guessed that like 7 hours had passed. The turns move fairly quickly. Like there's not a lot of downtime. You can sort of analyze your moves on your own turn. But basically, so what you're doing is buying stock in companies to start the game. And once you own enough shares to become the president of the company, so basically every company is split into 10 shares, 10% each, right? Once you have 20% of a company, you are the manager of the company, you own the company. And then you are the one in charge of running the rails and buying and selling assets, and you can sort of own two companies and trade assets between them and sort of manipulate the market, stuff like that. So there's a lot of...
So this sounds like a job to me.
Right.
I mean,
right.
So what does it feel like? What is the appeal of this?
There's an appeal on a lot of different levels. Like there's the stock market is like a very economic appeal, like the buy and sell and like... So for example, I had two companies in this game, and I sort of set one up to tank in a way that I could sort of sell off its assets to the company I was really in for. But my opponents didn't really know that, because it's very important in these type of games, especially in 1830, to buy shares in everybody's company. You're not going to be able to win these games just pumping up your own company. So
right.
You have to be involved and everybody.
There's like a level of investment in other people.
Right, which is why I
well.
think you, Kellen, you're sort of like into social and sort of the interaction thing. I think you would like this game in particular of the 18xx games because you can't win on your own. You can't just sit in your own like little cubby hole and pump up your company, pump up your railroad. You have to. The only way you win is by investing in other people and knowing when to like pull back and sort of like, backstab them and know when to work together, because if you don't do both, you're not going to win. There's no chance. So
Did you win?
I did not win. I came in second. But to get back to your question, there's the economic part. There's the management part, which is what I just was alluding to, where you have to be social. You have to be, you have to get people to come on board, and you have to be on board with other people and like work together so your rail lines don't intersect in such a way where you're blocking people off. But then again, later on, you might want to block them off when you want to like take a foothold. And then there's the map thing, which is like more of something you would see in a quote unquote regular game where you're actually laying tiles out. It's almost like a Carcassonne sort of thing. So 1830, I loved it. Got me reinvigorated. It's sort of hard to maintain that interest in 18xx games when you don't play them all the time because there's such a commitment. Mm-hmm. But playing this one, I mean, by the end my brain was fried. Like I couldn't identify like the banknotes we had in front of us. Like I was giving the banker like 520s and asking for 500 back because my brain melted so much. But like the next day after thinking about it, I just was really excited to get back in. So a lot of today and the last couple of days have been me looking back into like other 18xx games that I might be interested in playing.
Because there are a lot of these.
Yeah,
right?
there's a ton of them.
And like I would hesitate to call any of them like an introductory game, but like did you get the impression that 1830 would be the one to like dive into, or are there ones that are...
I mean, of what I've sort of understand about the games, I think definitely. And the other thing is, just very briefly, is so I've played 1830 and 1846. Both of them are considered like sort of introductory level games, but they play not totally different, but different enough that they're actually different games. That's another thing I was sort of like wasn't sure about, if all these 18xx games were basically the same game but like slightly different. But that's not the case. Each game seems to have its own unique flavor and it's like stands alone. So that's what makes diving into this genre even more interesting to me, this whole 18xx thing. So 1830 was a big thumbs up for me.
If you like railroads or if you want a second job.
Right.
Like, spreadsheets.
Those are the... Great. Well, why don't I jump into the game that I wanted to talk about today, which is a game that we've actually all played together recently called Archipelago. Archipelago is a semi-cooperative game where you start with a boat and 2 villagers, and you sort of explore out into this island system archipelago where you're building a village using action selection, buying technology cards, and sort of interacting with both the native folk and the markets there, and also interacting with the other players in the game. One of the things that I love about Archipelago the most is that it is a semi-cooperative game. So what that means is you can all lose together, or there can be one winner. So throughout the game, there are these crises, and what actually happens is if you don't pass the crisis together, the whole game ends and everyone loses. But so you have to continually help each other to pass these crises, but at the end of the game, whoever has the most points wins. That's further obfuscated by the fact that there could be a hidden traitor playing the game who actually wants the island to revolt against you. So you never quite know what you're supposed to be doing, but ultimately Archipelago has a catch-up mechanic, which is making the other players pay for the crisis. So a crisis will come up, it'll say, you need 10 pineapples or unrest will increase by 10. And then literally the best game of chicken in board games starts where you say, well, guys, I have 1 pineapple, so that's all I can help with.
Right.
Even though you have 7 or 8 behind your screen. And what makes the game so interesting is that Mark or Neelan might not think they can win if they give up their pineapples. So they have no incentive to help out. So if I think that I can still win the game, even by contributing more pineapples than them, I have to do that. It makes for this crazy sort of mind game where you're constantly evaluating your state versus someone else's state. Archipelago is definitely one of my favorite games of all time. I think every game sort of plays differently. And I think the crisis phase is sort of that best part, this semi-cooperative. And there really isn't another game like it. I'm constantly on the lookout, so if you've got one, please email me. I think other games like Dead of Winter have sort of flavors of it, but nothing comes through like Archipelago does.
And I don't know if you've mentioned this in your explanation, but There's the fact that each player has their own victory condition, which is shared by the group. So you know one of the victory conditions that everybody else is also going after, but they don't know what it is, and they sort of have to suss it out based on the way you're playing. So I might know that a victory condition is building the most churches. That's one of the victory conditions, right? And so I'm sort of building these churches knowing that that's going to be one of the shared conditions. And Kellen is sort of like watching me, like wondering why I'm building these churches, and then he might figure out that, hey, I need to do that because he also is scoring on it, even though he doesn't know from the outset that that's one of the conditions.
Yeah, I think that's one of the greatest parts, right? Because if the game is too open about who's winning, then it's really easy to say, well, Neelan, you have to contribute the most in this crisis because you're winning.
Right.
But with one hidden victory condition per player, you actually really can't calculate what your score is, and so it's more...
well, it's more about looking at the table and trying to figure out what everyone else has been focusing on, right?
Absolutely.
Right.
Another thing I really like about it is this tight action selection system where you're taxing your workers, you're importing and exporting stuff on the market. So the game itself is fun to sort of explore. There's a really cool mechanic where you can actually move your workers into another player's hex in the archipelago, and then you build a town there, and then you put your worker, your meeple in there, and then suddenly you're the mayor of that town. And that means that anyone who's in that hex can't harvest resources, they can't use their ports, they can't use their boats, unless they have asked your permission. And you literally can just say, no, you can't do that, or yes, you can, but you'll have to pay me for that.
Right. And this happened in our last game where we had this amazing tile of, I think it was pineapples.
Pineapple.
Yeah.
Pineapple Island.
I set up this amazing little pineapple plantation going, and then Kellen walks in and is like, nope, I'm the mayor of Pineapple Town now.
Right.
You get permission from me before you do anything here. And it was the worst.
And an important thing to note is we played a 4-player game of this, and none of the 3 people you hear on this podcast won that game, just to make it clear. So
Another win for the girlfriend. So Archipelago is a fantastic game that you should absolutely check out. I think I did want to point out one thing, which is that it is a very niche board game. It's a medium-ish Euro game with high levels of interaction, as well as unclear victory conditions.
Right.
There's a lot of people who love their heavy Euros, who want to know who's winning. And so these hidden victory conditions where you literally just don't know how you're doing freaks them out. So you go online and there's a lot of people who say this is their favorite game ever, and there's a lot of people who just think it's completely broken, and literally people who play it, not cooperatively at all. There's people who've tried to change the game system, which I think speaks to the fun of the underlying mechanics.
Right.
Of just sort of, it's a beautiful board, it's gorgeous, as you sort of start slowly exploring the archipelago and trying to get your resources going on either the import or export market. I think there's a lot of depth there, and I think it's truly underrated, even while still being a very highly rated game on Board Game Geek.
Yeah. I'm surprised, like you mentioned, that there aren't many other games that sort of give you the same sort of feeling as Archipelago, because it feels like it's a system, at least it's a set of mechanics that are so rife to be sort of copied and developed and improved upon. Because, personally, I don't think it's without its problems, but there aren't many games that replicate the same feeling. I feel like New Angeles is the only other example I can think of that has that intense social negotiation going on, but I like that a lot less than Archipelago.
Yeah, New Angeles is sort of a negotiation game from Fantasy Flight that has some of the core elements, but the underlying game is not a Euro game. It's actually a negotiation game where you're just arguing with each other, which is awesome too. Don't get me wrong, it's sitting on a shelf. I can see it from here. But it is not the brilliance of Archipelago.
Right. Yeah, I want to see more designers do stuff with that space. I've been playing a fair bit of Gaia Project recently. So this is, for those that don't know, this is a semi-spiritual sequel, I would say, to Terra Mystica. In fact, it actually says a Terra Mystica game on the box. So they're leaning into it, absolutely. I'm not going to talk too much about Terra Mystica specifically, except to say that I played it a couple of times, and it didn't really connect with me for a bunch of reasons. But Gaia Project, I feel, has streamlined a lot of the things I didn't like about Terra Mystica to the point that I've been enjoying it quite a lot. So to talk about what it's all about, you start with a modular board of planets of different colors. Each player has a faction, and there are 14 different factions, I forget, in 2 per color, and each faction has a specific color of planet that they're allowed to colonize by default. you're allowed to spread to other planets, but to do that, you'd have to terraform them by spending resources. So it's a game of collecting the resources you need in order to establish more colonies, in order to get more buildings, to get more resources, and grow your empire. Eventually, you're going to want to sort of get bigger and better buildings to unlock special abilities, or connect your colonies into federations, I guess they call them, where are these sort of collections of planets that will give you more points and more abilities towards the end of the game. It's not a crazy interactive game, except that you're competing for space. I wouldn't go so far as to call it multiplayer solitaire. You're definitely doing a lot of staring at your board and figuring out your optimal plays on your turn, but it moves fairly quickly. Like, you have about, I don't know, 5 or 6 different actions you can do on your turn, and there's a fair bit to think about, but it doesn't get bogged down for that sort of weight of your game. I would say it's like a 2 to 3 hour game at most.
So that's 2 or 3 games of it you could play in one game of 1830.
Exactly.
That's right. We actually had a side game of Gaia Project playing 1830.
Just on a separate table, yeah.
That's right.
Yeah, I've been enjoying this a lot. One of the things it does, and again, I don't want to get too much into differences between it and Terra Mystica, but it has a tech tree, which is something I always like. So you have about 6 different like tech paths you can go down, and each one is sort of giving you different ways to enhance like a different aspect of the overall strategy. And some of them like favor certain races in more than others would, but you can definitely get by fully investing in specific techs and wholly ignoring others that might be crucial for another player depending on their situation. So that's one of those elements where I feel like the more I play it, I would want to explore different tech options, even with races I've played before. But the thing I love the most about this game and games like it is just how asymmetric each of the factions is. So every faction you pick, it's got a completely different base ability and new abilities that will unlock when you build specific buildings. And it's one of those games where you play it once and you feel like you've figured it out. Then you play a different faction, it's like, oh, this actually plays completely differently to like how I played, the previous game. And just the process of working through all the factions, I mean, that's 14 fairly unique games you've got potentially.
That's cool. I had a question about this, and I know you were sort of hesitant to go with the comparisons between Terra Mystica and Gaia Project, but I've sort of, from what I've understood, seen Gaia Project as a Terra Mystica killer. Would you say that that's true? I mean, I'm sure there's room in some collections for both, but do you think that Gaia Project sort of replaces Terra Mystica?
I think if you hadn't played either, and you would ask me which I'd recommend, I would without hesitation say Gaia Project. I didn't play enough Terra Mystica to really have like I said, that solid an opinion on it. I will say that there are elements of Terra Mystica that feel like they're smoothed out by Gaia Project.
That's what I've heard, right?
So like the tech track in particular like replaces another system which didn't quite feel fleshed out in Terra Mystica.
The cultist system?
The cult track, exactly. The Terra Mystica boards, it has a lot more options and where you can go seemingly, so it feels like you're just presented with this wealth of like, oh my god, I could place a building here or here or here, whereas Gaia Project reduces actually the number of possible locations in a way that it just feels a little bit more streamlined, a little bit more elegant. I would say actually the biggest advantage of Gaia Project is Terra Mystica famously doesn't support 2 players very, very well.
Okay, right.
It works.
Yeah.
I played it too, and it's fine, but you almost have to house rule a couple of things.
Sure.
Gaia Project seemed great at 2 players
right
for that. So yeah, I've been really enjoying it a lot. I'm excited to play more of it. It seems real cool.
But this is one of those games where there's a main player board, which looks like that's where the fun is, right? But then you also have your individual player board, which you spend the whole game staring at and converting things in front of you,
totally,
as opposed to being in space.
So I think that's definitely not unfair. Like I think you're spending, like I said, you're spending a lot of time trying to optimize your engine. Yeah. Right. But it is much more dependent on the player board than I think you might assume. In that you're definitely and especially because spaces are a lot more limited than they were in Gaia Project. If someone's like, oh, I need this planet for my empire, or because it's the right color that I can convert, and someone steals it out from under you, I mean, that's a big hit to your system. I mean, I don't know if you would count that as interaction, but there's certainly like an element of competition in the map.
But Neelan, let's say the themes were swap-swapped here.
Right.
You're kind of a little bit of a space whore.
And honestly, like I don't even think that's super true because I actually missed some parts of the Terra Mystica theme, to be honest. Like, I think I lean more towards the space theme. Yeah. I think that suits me better, but there's something about the aesthetic of Gaia Project that doesn't quite capture kind of the magical feel of Terra Mystica.
Fantasy, all the different sorts of races.
Totally.
Yeah. I think it was even criticized, right, for the artwork, as it was sort of, people were like, this can't actually be the real release.
Yeah.
And then it was, in fact.
And, that's something I would definitely say is, I don't know, a bit, maybe not disappointing, but like, yeah, you look at the board for Gaia Project and it's kind of gaudy colors, and Terra Mystica had a more like muted color palette and looked a bit cleaner. Yeah.
Cool.
Okay, let's dive into our feature topic for today. We're going to be talking about math trading. Mark, do you want to tell us what that's all about?
Sure. So I'll just briefly go over what a math trade even is. So I think the best way to explain math trades is to give like a really general elementary example of one. So say, for example, I had a copy of Diplomacy, the game.
It's a great game.
Right. And I wanted an even greater game from Neelan, and he had Biblios.
Right? Oh, man.
Yeah, but
and
in this world, believe it or not, Neelan actually is willing to give up his copy of Biblios, but he doesn't want Diplomacy from me. He wants Resistance from Kellen.
Perfect.
Okay? Kellen...
I'm not giving up Diplomacy.
Well, no, Kellen doesn't have Diplomacy because I have it.
I see. I'm getting...
This is the crux of a math trade. I'm glad you slipped into that. So, Neelan has Biblios. Kellen, for some reason, doesn't want Biblios in a trade. He wants my copy of Diplomacy. Okay? Neelan wants Kellen's Resistance, but Kellen is not willing to give up Resistance for Biblios. So, normally that wouldn't work. Normally, none of us can make a one-for-one trade in that situation because I can't go to Neelan because he doesn't want to do that trade, and Kellen can't go to me because I don't want to do a trade of his copy of Resistance for my copy of Diplomacy. So, what a math trade achieves is it sort of chains our deals together. So, with a math trade, what happens is I give the copy of Diplomacy to Neelan. I give the copy of Diplomacy to Kellen. Sorry, I'm so eager for Neelan's copy of Biblios that I'm giving it to Neelan. No, in a math trade, I give the copy of Diplomacy to Kellen, who wants it. Kellen gives his copy of Resistance to Neelan, who wants that, and then Neelan gives me the copy of Biblios, and I am the winner of that trade because I get Biblios in the end, which is the greatest game of all time.
Oh my gosh. And if that sounds confusing to you, rest assured the computer on Board Game Geek does all the work for you.
Right.
But what it allows you to do is make trades beyond, trading your crappy game from last year for another crappy game from last year. You can actually get some three-way trades going on and actually kind of end up with something that everybody wants, because what the computer does, or the algorithm probably is a better way to say it, is it tries to make the most trades possible
for the entire
group.
Right?
And so these trades can be done either locally or on like a national level on Board Game Geek. And so what you're able to do is for each game that you list, like Biblios, you get to see a list of all the other games in that math trade, and you click the box next to I'd be willing to give up Biblios for any of these games. So in my case, I would check every box because I'd always be willing to give up the bad game that is Biblios, even for maybe just one promo card for a game that I don't even own.
Right. Whereas I would not even have Biblios on the math trade list because I would guard.
Why would you give that away?
Yeah, exactly. Because I have half a cent. But yeah, and so that's basically how it works. You list. There's two sort of phases. There's the listing phase, and then there's the actual trading phase. So in the first phase, you list every game that you want, as Kellen mentioned, and you check off all the games that you're willing to trade for each of your games. So Diplomacy, I'd maybe check off 5 games that I'm really willing to trade Diplomacy for. And then Resistance, I might check off 10 games. So I'm more willing to give up Resistance for these 10 games. And then that phase closes for everybody. And then the algorithm sort of sorts out, the biggest chain of trades. So for a national trade, which happened every month on Board Game Geek, you can have chains of hundreds of games, just one chain where it starts with one game and that person trades to another person and it just keeps going for trade after trade after trade. Incrementally, everybody gets what they want, what they're willing to give up and gets what they want, and it just keeps going up the line, trade for trade for trade for game for game.
And right, and that's like kind of the beautiful thing about this, right? Because you specifically said, I'm willing to give up this for another thing. Every trade that succeeds, that completes, is something that you are theoretically happy with. Maybe not as happy as you could have been, but certainly like, oh yeah, I was definitely willing to make that trade.
Right, so. Yeah. If there's a game that you have that you're not willing to give up for something, you just simply don't check that box. You don't pick that game. So, yeah, as you said, theoretically, every game that is traded in a math trade is something that everybody goes in acknowledging they're willing to make.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think there's sort of different levels of what you're putting in the math trade. We have a local math trade coming up at Strategicon. I think it's called Orcon.
Yeah,
Each one is a
Orcon.
different.
Yeah.
Here in Los Angeles.
President's Day weekend.
Yes, and I have a copy of Twilight Imperium 4th edition, so brand new, only played once in this math trade, but so far I don't think there's anything that's, $100+ in the math trade. So that means that when I see that list of all the potential games, I might not check any box. I might say, I'm unwilling to trade this for anything, unless that copy of Dune shows up, or maybe an old copy of Diplomacy or one of the other great interactive social games that are out there.
Right. But meanwhile, everyone else in the trade is trying to give up their cheap games to get your copy of Twilight Imperium. But
right, the magic would be giving up your copy of Biblios. Suddenly, Twilight Imperium.
I feel that's a different trade, though. I don't think there's any magic involved there.
Relative values. Before we go any further and sort of just talk broadly about how we each use math trades, if you have any questions about this, please reach out to us at boardgamebarrage@gmail.com. You can contact us on Instagram at boardgamebarrage, or on Twitter at, I think it's BRD Game Barrage. And then we're also on Board Game Geek. These things are pretty confusing, even with the computer still doing it. And I've had Mark definitely assist me. He's sort of our trade shark.
They're confusing, and that's definitely true, but they're addicting. I mean, once you get into the rabbit hole, as it were, they can get really, really fun, and it's sort of like a mini Christmas, because you don't know, you're giving up games really that you don't want for one reason, or maybe maybe you just played them enough. Maybe you like the game, but you're just ready to move on, and then suddenly one day you wake up, you check the results, and you get these games that you want. It's like, and it's a surprise, because you check off maybe 10 boxes, so you know what games you might be getting, but you don't know until the morning of the trade completion. So again, you get that like kid on Christmas feeling in
just
the morning.
a little thrill.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally.
For sure.
Yeah, because like you're saying, like there are like potentially hundreds of trades I'm willing to make, but typically for one person in a math trade, I don't know what is your typical average for like trades? Like
I think I'm probably really on the higher end of.
Sure.
I usually generally complete about a dozen to 18 trades a math trade. So I think the average, I don't know, it obviously depends on how many games you're putting out there, but I think most people get 3 or 4
Yeah,
trades.
totally. I think the times I've done it, it's been like 3 or 4 different trades, and like and each one of those feels like a cool little surprise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like,
That's one of the best parts of it.
And I actually don't know the answer to this, so throwing a live one to Mark. Yeah. What happens, in a one trade, where I give you a game for another game, and the game is damaged, or there's something wrong with it?
Sure.
Like, there's some sort of recourse, right? Because it's 1-to-1.
Right.
But in a thing where in a circle, a Neelan gives me a game without the rule book, or a game with some missing components. Like, what is my recourse? Is it just sort of on your honor? They figure it out.
So yeah, that's basically what it is. So when you are entering a math trade, there's sort of a disclaimer. Or maybe rules is a better way of explaining it at sort of the head of the trade, on that very first page where you're submitting games, and they sort of go over how you should present your games, how you should list them. They say list the game, list the edition if you know it, and the biggest thing is list the condition. That's obviously one of the biggest things that people are looking for when they're looking at games. They're looking for the games that they want to get, but they also are concerned about the condition of the game, make sure all the parts are there. So that's a very big part of listing your games, and sometimes mistakes happen, and sometimes things happen in shipping, or I find people have been forgiving, and I'm generally forgiving when it comes to like issues here and there, but honestly I've made hundreds and hundreds of trades. I've had maybe 2 or 3 issues.
Oh wow, yeah, because that's what I was going to ask. Like, how often does that actually happen?
Yeah, it doesn't happen very often, and when and maybe I'm just fortunate, maybe I just have been lucky, but I have also seen cases, and again, they're exceedingly rare, where more serious issues happen, like games are either not sent, or they're much worse condition than they've been listed as, or maybe the condition hasn't been listed and the game turns out to be in pretty bad shape. And those people either, because there's such a strong community, and the math trade community is like, they're very strong and they're very passionate about this, that people they're always given a chance to make things right, because again, things can happen, but they won't, if you keep doing stuff like that, you just won't be invited into the trades. You just be locked out. You just won't be allowed to list games anymore. So I can understand the concern on that regard, but I think that sort of stuff self-regulates really, really well. I don't think it's a big issue.
So why don't we kind of go around and talk about not just our trading philosophy, but sort of what we use math trades for. Because I think, Mark, what you use trades for and what I use them for are pretty different.
Yeah.
Sure.
Why don't we start with most normal, which I think would be Neelan, and then myself, and then Mark, you can talk maybe about your trade shark ways.
Sure, you got it.
So I mean, I'm relatively new to this. I would say I think I've done about maybe this is my third trade or fourth, I forget. But yeah, only for the last year or so. And generally, I've come into it pretty small. This is the most stuff that I'm putting on a trade for this next one. And it comes from a place of, for the most part, it just comes from a place of space, firstly, and sort of just the burden of ownership, which is, I think, something that Kellen and I have spoken about a lot, which is just, to some extent, any game you have sitting on this is how I feel at least, any game I have sitting on my shelf unplayed just kind of feels like it's taking up mental space. It's a sort of a source of anxiety. It's this idea I'm not playing that game, and I see it every day. I'm like, oh man, when am I going to play the game? When am I going to play that game? And it's almost detracting from my enjoyment of the hobby, right? So my aim this time has just been to offload games that I just literally haven't touched in maybe over 2 years.
Yeah. Well, and one thing we haven't touched on is that you can actually add money as a potential trade option.
Right.
And so do you do that, a lot of that, Neelan?
Yeah, so and actually, especially this time, that's what I'm aiming to do. I'm not hoping to flip a game for another game, because that sort of defeats the point. Obviously where that makes sense, absolutely. Or if it comes down to flipping a bigger box game for a smaller one, because like I said, it is a space issue for a lot of it. But yeah, I'm actually more looking to use this as a venue for selling games more than anything.
Streamlining, maybe?
Yeah, exactly. Just streamlining my collection down. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think I use math trades for mostly similar reasons to Neelan. I think my first math trade, I went a little click happy and traded away a bunch of games that I didn't want and got a bunch of games that I didn't really want.
Right, that's a big deal.
Sure. And some of those are now being traded again at this upcoming trade, where I kind of wanted to try the game at some point, but didn't want it enough to get around to playing it. Living in Los Angeles is a challenge in terms of space. I also feel similar to Neelan in terms of that burden of ownership. A game takes up space. The rules take up space in your mind, and each game sort of fulfills its own unique purpose. And while I love area control games, I have Inish and Blood Rage and and I want to get games like El Grande and Dominant Species, but the question maybe at some point is, will you play all of those, and still get new games, and still play party games with your friends, and still, have time to, have a job or do anything else? And so math trades for me are ways to sort of flip that game that, even if I really like it, I know it's popular, maybe I can get another game that I haven't had a chance to play.
Sure.
And if I get a new game and I play it a couple times, that's a good trade for me.
Right.
I have my perennial favorites, and then I'm always looking for new games. And I just looked at my shelf and saw Cthulhu Wars. And in a conversation about good area control games, I would be remiss not to say that Cthulhu Wars is the best.
Best.
That's what I think about math trades.
Best area
Just
control.
Cthulhu Wars.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Try
I
get Cthulhu
think
Wars.
I
That's
thought
a
we
good
were
math
going to
trade.
go into a best game of all time, and then
No, it's not.
I'd have to
There's-
make my point about the fact that Biblios is the best game of all time. But all right, so
If you could pull off a Biblios for Cthulhu Wars trade, I would be mad.
but the problem is I would never be on the Biblios side of that.
Fair enough.
I wouldn't give up.
Well, the
on
other
that.
way around then.
Yeah,
You would
I guess.
trade
Yeah, actually,
Biblios.
okay, Kellen, give me your Cthulhu Wars. I'll get you Biblios. It'd be an even trade, and you'll come out on top. Although I do love Cthulhu Wars also. But so I guess I should talk about my sort of views on math trading.
And this is crazy, guys.
Yeah, so this
listen
is
to this.
I'm certainly. I guess I'm certainly an edge case when it comes to math traders. And you guys will probably have to rein me in if I start going on too many tangents, because I love math trades. I started maybe 2 years ago, and I was going to say thinking about saying I sort of eased into it, but really thinking back, I was sort of hook, line, and sinker right away. I don't really. I can understand that burden of ownership. I genuinely can, but I'm fortunate in that I have a lot of opportunities, I think, to play games, and I like introducing games to both my many gamer friends and to my,
You play games without us?
But you mean, who are these
very occasionally. And I never feel good about it. I always feel shameful.
You don't like them as much.
as us.
Of course not.
Got it.
But
other podcasts you're on.
Well, I didn't want to bring that up here, but I think I have opportunities to play games, quite often. For me, games on the shelf, this is interesting because for me, games on the shelf that haven't been played for a long time, which I have many of, I really don't feel any shame about because I always see them as potential games that I'm going to be playing. I don't mean to say that I wouldn't trade those games or I wouldn't be more likely to trade those games because I probably would be because I'm not playing them, obviously. But I see those games as, again, potential. I may not be playing it now, but I feel like I'll be playing it soon and I'll love it. So,
but you go so far as you have a new game that you love,
right.
Like an Inish or what have you, a great game.
Sure.
And you see that it goes out of print. You will put that in the math trade,
so
knowing that it'll come back into print and that you'll buy it again.
Right.
100% guaranteed. I will buy this again.
This is my 4D chess sort of math trade side.
Yeah.
So I sort of feel a little squeamish about admitting this sort of stuff, but I mean, I get enjoyment out of it. I get enjoyment from the hunt and from
the trade.
From the trade and from
trading is a game.
Exactly, and maximizing value is a game. It's like the min-max thing in like a Euro game sort of thing, and I sort of see that in math trades. Like if I know a game is, like you said, going out of print or another edition is coming out soon, I will quickly sell it while the value is high. Or if I know a game is going out of print, or maybe like there's a swell of people who are online trying to get a game into print and it's just been announced that they're not making another printing of it, so like what you've got is going to be even more rare, I'll hold on to that or I'll try to trade more for that.
But you like trading so much that you have actually sold games of mine without me even knowing that you were helping me.
I will sell your games, I will trade your games for games that you want, and I will gain nothing from it but the thrill of the hunt, the palpable, visceral thrill of the hunt, which I'm feeling now even just counting about it. Yeah, I love that.
Because we joked about the Biblios Theater War trades, but I've seen you pull off really impressive stuff.
For example, a chain of trades that springs to mind now is I traded. I forget what the first game of the trade was, but it was something. It was like akin to a Bob Ross sort of game, something like in that level. And I traded that game for a game called Triassic Terror, which is again, I'm going to be using numbers. I know that's sort of cold, but so I traded this $20 game for Triassic Terror, which is like $40 game, and I traded that game for Chaos in the Old Worlds, which is like a $80 game, and I traded that for Food Chain Magnate, which is like a $100 game. So basically, I traded a $20 game for a $100 game, and that just like I mean, again, we're talking about $80 and there's I'm sure I've put more work in than $8 was worth, but just the hunt. God, I love
fun of that.
Yes, exactly.
I was reminded of this by a friend recently, but you're basically the guy that trades the paperclip up for the house.
That guy's my
guy
hero.
For board games.
That guy is my hero.
Right.
I literally just bought a couple games that were on sale with very little interest in actually playing them, just because I'm interested in putting them in this math trade in particular because it's local. And that's another thing, like local versus national trades. National trades, you obviously get more people participating because they're around the country, but you have to worry about shipping and all that stuff. We're fortunate enough to be in a big city like Los Angeles, so even the local trades, even though you have less people participating, you still get quite a few games up for trade. So yeah, I literally bought 2 copies of Near and Far that I hear is a good game, but I'm not super interested in playing them, but they were on sale for like $18 each, so I bought 2 copies just to trade them. Right? Yeah, wow. So I'm maybe addicted.
One of my favorite things about your attachment to this as a hobby is that we end up with these days sometimes where we're just opening boxes of games we've received, which is a mini Christmas in itself.
Right. I mean, that's another thing. Yeah. I guess what Nealon is sort of alluding to is the fact that, and I don't do this so much anymore, but when I was really into doing a lot of trading, I was trading and receiving games, sending them out and getting them to such a degree that I had games these boxes and boxes of games that I just wasn't opening. And I live in an apartment Los Angeles, as Kellen and Nealon were saying, space is at a premium, but I just had these boxes in the corner of games that I traded for, and it got to the point where I'd forgotten what these games were. I'd just forgotten what were in the boxes. So we had like a little thing where we all got together and just opened these boxes, and it was again. So I had the I had the Christmas of the math trade day where I found out these games were games I was going to get, and then I had another Christmas when I actually opened them up and I actually saw these games. So and again,
were we elves in this analogy?
I think so. Yeah, I think actually next time I'll be bringing the hats, the little green hats,
yeah.
and stuff like that. But there's something to be said for the fact that these games are sitting in these boxes for months at a time, not being played. But again, for me, I was confident that these games these are games that I trade either because I know I'm going to trade them for other games that I want, but ultimately the goal genuinely is to get games that I like because I love playing games. So this is a way to get more games and games that I know I like because it's very important to me to research games that I'm ultimately getting. I mean, sometimes I research them for their value, but ultimately the games in the end of these chains, for me at least, are games that I will hold on to forever, that I love. For example, 1830 is a game I got from a trade. Great trade, by the way. Amazing trade.
I think we should offer this as a service, maybe. You can email us, and Mark will evaluate your trade.
That is a half a joke because I am.
I do it to you actually.
That's true.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, I think that probably covers it on math trades.
It could go on for.
You'll never know as much about it as Mark. I think that's a fair statement.
Maybe try putting a game or two in the next national trade, or maybe
just start with a couple of games. I think you can go too far down this rabbit hole.
Sure, but and if you have any questions, feel free to contact me at the Board Game Barrage site. I'm the Green Tank, and I'd genuinely be super happy to help you out.
There are pretty good resources on Board Game Geek,
sure.
Just covering like a step by step how you
absolutely.
actually get into the process. Like we said, I mean it's fairly complex, but it's also manageable if you just step through it.
Yeah.
Cool.
So before we close out the show, we're going to talk about stuff that we're looking forward to, stuff that we're excited about. Personally, I've been doing a little bit of work on the website, preparing our next big feature. We're going to do a big article talking about our favorite games of 2017.
Yep. Sort of like a combination of our three individual lists.
Exactly,
right?
like a collective view of our tastes, as it were.
Using academic rigor
exactly.
and algorithms.
The same
Using
algorithm
maths.
for the math trade.
Yeah.
We employed that.
That's right. So I'm excited about a game we're trying to get set up maybe for next week of Guards of Atlantis, the tabletop MOBA, which I know there are a couple of games in that genre, but I haven't played any of them, and this one seems like the best of the bunch.
Oh, have you not played it yet?
No, I've not.
How excited you
No,
are.
yeah,
Right,
yeah.
We've done.
Kelly and I.
It's great.
It seems
like
really cool. So I'm really excited about. Yeah, I think we're going to get a big game going sometime next week. So I'm really.
I think you'll dig it. It seems like something you'd really.
Yeah.
enjoy.
What player count are we trying to get to?
I think we're pushing for like an 8-player game, which
4v4.
isn't even as big as it goes. Yeah, 4v4. Like it goes up to like 11 people.
Man.
And it like works well with large accounts.
Apparently, yeah.
So yeah, I'm super pumped up about that.
Cool. And the thing that I'm looking forward to the most is I've actually already started Gen Con 2018 plans. I just got the press badge for Board Game Barrage, so I'm happy about that. And now we're trying to figure out housing. So we're all sitting in our group chat going who's in, who's out, and trying to get that plan. But the more people you go with, I feel like the better off it is, because sort of exploring during the day, and then at night you're trying out all the new games you got.
Yeah.
And I can get Mark and Neelan to buy the games, so that I
Trade
don't have
for
to.
the games.
Well,
trade
trade,
for the games.
Mark. That's the only thing you've said. Trade and biblios this episode.
Those are
but
the
that's
two
good.
words that I need.
But yeah, I'm excited for that too, because I feel like last year, like you said, we ran into the problem of like not being able to play games easily, just being the two of us. And
It was just Neelan and I, and,
Right.
and one romantic
one romantic
downturn.
room.
And I'm eager to get in on that.
Get on the
so-
romance,
yeah.
yeah, totally.
I don't know what Christina will think, because I'd rather share a room with you than her.
Goes without saying.
Yeah.
So that's going to do it for our second episode of the podcast. Thank you all so much for listening. If you want to find us on our website, that's at boardgamebarrage.com. Otherwise, you can find us on social media. On Twitter, we're at BRDGameBarrage, or find us on Instagram.
Board Game Barrage, or on Facebook at Board Game Barrage. So if you see any pretty pictures in any Board Game Barrage property, that's actually me, the photographer.
That's exclusively
The
you.
Red Tank. Yeah, they've never taken
A picture in our lives.
some of our best.
Yeah, we've never,
photographs,
absolutely. Yeah, that's going to do it. Thank you guys so much for listening. Peace.
See ya. Bye.
They say the truth is the number one stopper. They say you think, but you never want to speak up. They say you're hiding there, you're busy, but what's on your mind, kid? What's on your mind, kid? They say out loud there will never be me.
Thanks to Heart Society for letting us use the fantastic What's on Your Mind Kid. Check them out at heartsocietymusic.com. I literally will let Mark go to the post office on my behalf. I'll like pay him to go to the. How do you even like? How do you like this? What is your life like?
People like things like Nealon likes spreadsheet games, and you like yelling at people and making fun of them at the table, and I like doing math trades. I
postal
like going
work.
Yeah, postal work. That's right, exactly. I feel a kinship with our postal worker brethren.